We're talking today with Mr. Thaddeus Zator of Kentwood, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Zator, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background? To begin with, where and when were you born?
Newark, New Jersey, December 6, 1919.
Now, did you grow up in Newark or did you move away from there?
No, I came on the left Newark as a baby. My father came here to Michigan to get his job at Ford's, and we migrated. I visited Newark later on because my grandmother still lived in New Jersey, Newark, and I was most of my time was in Detroit. Went to Detroit schools, high school in Detroit. Brought up in Detroit and spent my later years in Allen Park.
All right.
And now here I am in Grand Rapids.
Okay. Now, when did you finish high school?
1938. I
All right.
graduated half a year ahead of time. I should have been 39, but I did it in 38.
Okay. And then what did you do after you graduated?
I don't remember. After I graduated,
Did you get a job?
oh yes, I worked at Timken Axle, making axles. I was trained as a machinist because we had a machine shop in high school, and my father used to take his car apart every Sunday. The Fords were easy to take apart in those days, and we did that. And I watched him as he did it. I cranked the car sometimes for him and whatnot to start it, you know. So anyway, I qualified as a machinist. And that was my career later on, because in the Army I had high rankings because of my ability to understand machinery.
All right. Now, let's see. Did your father keep his job all through the 30s? Did he stay with Ford that whole time?
On and off. He'd be out of work many times, you know, and we'd wait to get recalled, and he would be always recalled, and he went back to work. And he was a specialist knowing how to mix rouge. They used to come red powder to be used as an abrasive and polisher for glass. And they passed in those days. They made glass in Detroit, in the Detroit area. Well, they polished it anyway.
So he had a good enough specialized skill that he would get work pretty
yes,
regularly.
Yeah. I used to watch my father do that kind of work. He did always putting around, repairing stuff around the house, you know, and doing everything. Yeah.
All right. Now, before Pearl Harbor happened, were you paying any attention to what was happening in the world? You know, there was a war going on in Europe, that kind of thing?
Definitely.
Okay. And how did you get your information? How did you learn about things?
I was a reader. My father was a great reader. He read his Polish paper, he read the English paper. We read two papers in the house. We had magazines in the house, and he talked politics. He talked government. I was a listener. And that's the background I had. And so later on, before when I come out of high school, now still in high school, I used to belong to a panel discussion group in my local library. In those days, I was a regular attendant to the library. Sure.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you follow news of things like the invasion of Poland and then the attacks on France and the rest of that?
Oh yeah, we followed it all the way.
All right. And then how did you learn about Pearl Harbor? Do you remember where you were when you heard about it?
No. I never gave it a thought of where I was supposed to be at Pearl Harbor.
Now, was it a surprise when it happened? I mean, had you thought the Japanese might attack us, or?
Oh, now I know how the Pearl Harbor. It was on a Sunday kind of a day, if I'm not mistaken, and I belonged to a local club, and they were liberals, and I suspected them too liberal. They were very much involved in supporting Russia against Hitler, and they wanted us to get into the war. And they were when Pearl Harbor happened, they were excited. those people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were my girlfriends, by the way. I called them up and talked to them, and I went to a particular meeting on that Sunday to visit that girl, and she had visitors also, and I remember they were all talking about Pearl Harbor. That's the day I found out.
All right.
And I kind of later on when that kind of company worried me because I wondered if I qualified to work to do certain work after a while.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then after, once America was in the war, did you consider enlisting in the military, or did you just want to stay where you were?
Oh, I knew I was going to be drafted eventually, but I wanted to work as long as possible. I had a pretty fair job, making fair money, making a few dollars. I sort of wasn't ready to be in the services, especially when I hear the stories about people coming back from the fight over in the Pacific.
Right.
And so some of my friends were there also. So what I did was I used the 6-month deferment that the factory gave me for making war materials.
Mm-hmm.
We made spiders for the brake for big trucks. I was making big spiders and for the wheels.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. So you were working in a defense industry. But then middle of 1942, then you get drafted.
That's right.
Okay. Now, once you got the draft notice, what did you have to do? Did you report someplace?
Camp Crowder. Report to Camp Crowder. They assigned me to. They gave me all kinds of tests. First of all, intelligence tests. I ranked high mechanical tests, and they sent me to Signal Corps and Camp Crowder for basic training.
All right. Now, where is Camp Crowder?
Missouri.
Okay. Do you remember what part of Missouri it was in? Was it in western Missouri someplace?
Neosho.
Okay. It's the middle of nowhere.
I remember Neosho. Yeah.
Okay. How do you remember anything about the camp? What did it look like? What were the barracks
Not
like?
very much, no. No. I remember being stupid enough to answer. Did I read a certain magazine? And I picked it up, and I got a KP for reading that magazine. If you did, you qualified to read the magazine. This guy didn't like the magazine, I guess. I don't know.
All right. Now, can you describe the kind of training you were getting there? Did you get regular infantry basic training?
Not just infantry, no, sir. I never was pushed very hard to do any physical work, really. But I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I remember standing up for roll call in the morning, being asleep. Really, I fell asleep standing up. That's almost impossible to do.
All right. Now, can you describe a little bit the training you got there?
The basic training wasn't much of a training. They tested us on reading simple code, the dot dash code, the ability to read or listen to telephone calls and whatnot, radio calls. And gee, I don't remember anything else much about the basic over there in Camp Crowder.
Do you have a sense of how long you were there?
What?
How long were you there?
It doesn't seem very long. It was just a few months, I think.
Okay.
That's about all.
All right.
Short time.
And while you were there, did you stay on the base the whole time? Or did you stay on the base the whole time, or did you go into town?
Yes. Oh no, I had a couple of day pass, and I went to Tulsa, and by train, and up and back for the weekend. I came back. That was the extent of my outgoing. I just did it once, I think, because there was no other times. They didn't allow it anyway.
Right. Did they have a lot of emphasis on discipline? Did you have to learn to follow orders and
we
salute?
followed orders, definitely, yes. And we were all waiting for the assignment. And I was, it seems like I was, we were exchanging views in the quarters. And some of the people alongside me this guy was dating some movie actress from Hollywood, and this other guy was a writer. We also had a man who was handicapped, but he was a genius in radio. And he ate, he slobbered because he was handicapped.
Okay.
Slight handicap.
So you had a pretty unusual bunch of men you were training with.
Definitely.
All right. So you were kind of a select group. Where did they send you after Camp Crowder?
They rushed me in like an emergency type thing. Seemed like they were looking for a certain kind of guy, and either they found me or they decided not to look any harder, whatever it was. Anyway, they rushed me with another fellow called Jerry Backey from Indiana. He was from Indiana. We met, and he came rushed me by train to the East Coast, and then from the East Coast we went by train slowly up to Halifax, California, Canada, all the way up there, and picked up a boat, the Louis Pasteur, French boat. It was supposed to be fast. In other words, no escort,
Right.
because it was zigzagged across the ocean, and we're all alone. And they rushed me out to get to England.
Okay. Well, now, did you have a specialization at that point? Was there a certain kind of work that you were good at, or?
We did, yeah. Oh, I forgot. We got to mention that. We did. They were introducing us to. Yeah, that's a good reminder, because there was something. There was some kind of a training over there. Because I was doing the teletype. They introduced me to the teletype to see whether I could manage the teletype. A teletype is a machine that it's a typewriter, and it sends out signals through wire or whatever. Print. In other words, the other end will be printing with another teletype in the other room or another city. That's the connection.
Right.
Or if it comes on tape, punched out tape by radio, then it goes through a machine and goes back to the teletype and becomes English.
So what they had before computers.
But then again, that's the teletype. That's the last I saw of teletypes after that, really, to speak of.
All right. But were you somebody? Okay. So basically, do you remember anything else about about crossing the ocean other than the fact that you zigzagged a lot?
We zigzagged and I was seasick, very, very seasick. Oh, and I've been that way. One time I got seasick in a rowboat, so I know I had the tendency. So I'm one of those few. And they fed me orange juice, tomato juice rather, and toast. And they held me while I threw up. And I was in the cot. Most of the time they put me in the cot. They checked on me once in a while, a couple of times in the boat. But I remember before this happened, they decided when they rushed me, I didn't have my overseas shots. So they had to give to me all in a big hurry. So the orders were that there was somebody who was supposed to give me my shots. They didn't give it to me on train. So they gave it to me on the boat, on the Louis Pasteur. So the first thing I got in the Louis Pasteur, that somebody got a hold of me in a hurry, took me over to the top. So I was looking over the side, and they buried both my arms, and they were punching me on both sides. I think I must have got 6, 7, 8 punches, you know what I mean? They shot me all over the place. So I got inoculated in a hurry.
All right. Now, do you remember where you landed when you got to England? Did you go to Scotland or Ireland or to England or?
When they land,
Yeah, where did you land? Yeah.
someplace in. First of all, the trip took us to the Azores to
Okay.
get there, and I saw the flying fishes. I never saw. I looked at the side. I looked at the fish was in the water. There's no place to land, and it was flying. You know, so it couldn't have been a land fish,
Right.
bird,
Right.
because it was too small, and then there was nothing to land on.
Right.
But it was a fish. So that's the only time those things are possible. Fish to fly.
Now, usually, if you went to the Azores, you'd go to North Africa or.
Just on the verge, we skirted the land, and finally we ended up. I don't even remember where we landed, but we landed all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you in England or?
In London.
Okay.
The headquarters is in London.
All right.
So I was introduced to London immediately. In London, on Green Street. I lived on Green Street. Near the Marble Arch, near the Hyde Park. It's just a walk, short distance, 2-minute walk to the speakers' rostrums in Hyde Park.
All right. Now, was this a facility the Americans had taken over? So were there
There
other?
was apartment houses. The people some of the wealthy people that lived in those apartment houses, they went to safer places. And they abandoned those homes, and they were very happy to give them to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we took over all of them. Those that weren't happy, they were asked to move.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so they were vacated, and we took over about the whole couple of blocks. These are all the double-decker houses, you know, and everything else. They were full of GIs. We had our kitchens up there and everything else.
All right. Now, what kind of duty were you assigned to?
During the quarters.
Well, no. What kind of work did you do?
Oh, my work was to. First of all, before I got to overseas, wait a minute. When I went to that, we were skipping something.
Okay.
I trained for after Camp Crowder. I didn't. That's right. I correct myself. After Camp Crowder, I did not go on a boat. After Camp Crowder, I went to Arlington, Virginia,
All right.
across the Potomac from Washington, from the capital, where I trained. They put me in signal. There's a signal intelligence building, training place, and they trained languages, and they trained a lot of things over there. But they also trained me to on a particular coding machine, coding and encoding machine, encoding and decoding. I meant to say.
Okay. Now, were you trained to operate the machine or repair it or both?
First of all, you operate to learn how to operate. You learn the machinery, and my job was to learn how to operate it.
Right.
So I learned the whole machine. And this was at Arlington Hall, and this every day went to school. You see, but first of all, before we went to school, I worked in Lincoln Park. I call it Lincoln. We all call Lincoln Park because the officer in charge was Lincoln. Name of Lincoln, and he was in charge of the park, which is the outside the school, the grass. So I stood on the shovel, pretending I was doing something to the grass. I waited, I think, about 6 weeks while they were investigating me to see I qualified to be in that kind of secret place. Before I entered the hallway and to school as a study. And so that's exactly what we did.
Okay. Now, while you were living there, did you get a chance to go into Washington, or did you just?
Definitely, yeah. Went to Washington on the weekends, so and then sometimes I visited my grandmother in New Jersey. I did that one. Oh, I did that one time, and I met Mrs. Roosevelt. I talked to her. Yeah.
How did you get to meet her?
I came out of the depot. As I came out, I was confronted by the GI, and he asked, he had a camera in his hand, and he said to me, I want to take a picture of that car, Mrs. Roosevelt sitting in the car, but I don't know how to talk to her. And so he thought, being a sergeant, he thought I could do it, because, so I was doing him a favor. After I did it, I was a little, how do I know this was a camera? In those days, it was safe, I guess, yeah. How do I know this was a camera? Anyway, at that time I didn't have that fear. I went ahead and walked up to the limousine, the park limousine, and Mrs. Roosevelt was inside reading the Parade magazine, which is Sunday magazine. And I could see it outside, and she looked over the magazine, looked at me, and listened to me. I asked her, Mrs. Roosevelt, I'm trying to take a picture of you. Would you mind if I took a picture of you? And she says, yes, I don't mind it. And so immediately she nodded at the other guy because the guards are coming over towards me. So she shooed him away, first of all, and then she propped herself up a little better, and she smiled at me. I took the picture. I gave the camera back to the fellow. I thanked her, of course. Gave the camera back to the fellow and never saw the picture. That reminds me, like later on I took a picture of Eisenhower the same way, and never saw that picture either.
But you did at least get to meet Mrs. Roosevelt, so
Yeah.
well, something.
And I talked to her.
All right. Now let's kind of go get you back over now to London. So were you working then as a code machine operator? Was that your job?
No, I never operated one.
Okay.
The people who operate are the ones who work in code rooms, and they receive encoded messages, and they code it, and they also encode messages.
Right.
That's their job. That's all they do in the message center.
So what did you do?
I learned how to. First of all, let me tell you about my training.
Mm-hmm.
To pass that training, to qualify to be top man as I was, I had to take tests, you know. So they all along, I'm the only one in the class, and the machine is on the table, and they send me out of the room. They put a fault on it. Then they come bring you back and they tell you what's wrong with it, fix it up. You see, I did 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The 10th one, I did all 9 perfectly in a hurry. The 10th one was the kind where when I was called back, I instead of working on the machines, the parts that would go bad, I'm working on the housing of the machine, you know what I mean? I'm looking at the crazy stuff that, you know, that doesn't look normal. Well, that's where they stopped me. Because that's exactly what and I got scared. I thought, gee, I did something wrong. Well, actually, that was the fault. They took the machine apart and turned it and put it back in the wrong way to stump me, you see. And I wasn't stumped because I was looking at it. Anyway, I ranked very high. I knew the machine real well, and I was able to fix always repaired everything that was always ever wrong with the machine on the field.
Okay. So basically, so you were in fact then a technician on these code machines, and that was why they needed you over there in England.
Pops, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Now, when you were in England, did you stay in London or did you go to other places?
My job was to stay in London and go wherever they send me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they would send me to a close place. I can go there by bus or underground. Or sometimes they would train if it was a couple-hour drive. And then sometimes when I went to Northern Ireland, I went by boat. You see.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, they flew me up by air to a lot of places during the invasion in France, but not in England.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay. Now, were you sort of with the main American headquarters there in London? Were you part or connected to that?
There was a mixture of all kinds of. There were a lot of buildings in London taken over by the GIs, I guess, and they all had to live someplace, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So the living quarters was Green Street, more or less,
Right.
near the Marble Arch. And these people were assigned to different places, different offices. Nobody talked about what they're doing.
Right.
You see, and even in our building, nobody talked. Nobody knew what the other guy was doing.
But when you went to work, was there a particular building that you worked in? Or
Oh yes, we had to. It was a residential building, a regular apartment, a 3-4 story building. The only difference in that building was we closed the windows. We didn't want anybody looking through the windows. But otherwise, it was doing normal. We took over. Our quarters were the basement. We had no windows there. No basement. There was windows, no basement. So we had our. It was very rudimentary. There wasn't much there. There was machinery there. There were a few chairs, tables, and whatnot. There was the meeting place, and the people used to get together, and they would be assigned to do certain things with certain machines. We had other means besides my machine. There were other ways of sending messages, and so they worked on. They had their job, and sometimes they would assign me when I'm waiting, doing not much. They assigned me to go along with them and work with them, and I did, you know. And I had to start from scratch to see what they're doing. I had to read the prints, you know, whatnot, and study it. You see, I'll never forget. Talking about reading the prints, I'll never forget. Major Barlow walked in one time, and he wanted to know a certain machine. That guy, he was a genius. He looked at the print. He studied, he go over his fingers. Oh yeah, that's good. You walk away, and I looked at it. What the heck? It will take me a couple hours to study it and learn it. This guy did it in 5 minutes. He went to DIT, not DIT. He went to Carnegie Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I went to DIT. He joined the Institute of Technology.
All right. Now, while you were living in London, Were there bombing attacks or buzz bombs?
They're just at the end of the raids. One of my assignments, we all took turns standing on top of a roof and watching the shrapnel go by. And they would tinkle, fireflies, shrapnel, and you would put the helmets on. And nothing ever happened in my area. And after a while, you listen to the sound all clear, and that'd be the end of that. But that was the end of the raises. I never saw the big part of it.
Okay. Now, by 1944, the Germans are launching the V-1s, the buzz bombs. They're shooting some of them toward London. Did you remember any of that, or was that not going on when you were there?
We saw very little of that. That was also the end of that kind of maneuvers.
Right. Now, did you go to other American bases in other parts of England when you would travel and do work?
Oh yes.
What kind of places would you go to?
Headquarters. Our machine would have to be in a higher headquarters. It wouldn't be in the company headquarters.
Right.
It might be in a division at times, very few times. It's usually in the core headquarters or the big headquarters.
And what about air bases? Did you go there?
Yes, actually I worked with the fighter. It seems like I always ended up by servicing the fighter fields, and not unless there were some bombers there mixed, but I never seen it.
Okay. Well, they were organized, the fighters mostly in the 9th Air Force, and the big bombers were in the 8th Air Force. So they may have had different bases.
Maybe so.
So you'd be going to the fighter strips and so forth. Okay. While you were living in London, did you kind of get to go out on the town and have a good time?
Oh yes, yeah, sure. We took advantage of always took advantage, which our standbys were what do you call those USO places? Yeah, and always have a hot fire, always a log fire going there, nice and warm. Always had something to drink, a snack or something, And I took naps there very often. I used to come there and fall asleep in front of that fire. Yeah. Anyway, we took all the musical reviews because we lived pretty close. It's a subway ride, underground ride, to the metro, to the Piccadilly Circus area, and we used to. What was the name of the place? The USO place on Piccadilly Circus. My memory is shot.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the kind of thing somebody can look up if they're viewing this interview and they want to know that.
I saw some plays there, plays and musicals and whatnot. We laughed and had a good time. Had dates, went to the bars, local bars. Drank the warm beer, cold beer as well. I like warm beer anyway. Didn't bother me.
All right. In general, how did the English people treat you?
Wonderful, wonderful. They always treated me well, all the way around. Wonderful. They stopped me from smoking cigars because I used to smoke cigars before that. But in England, a GI walking with a stump of a cigar in his mouth. I had too many people looking at me as if I was something special, as a kind of freak or something. You know what I mean? Because Church was the only guy that was supposed to smoke cigars. And so it started me smoking cigarettes because we were rationing 5 packs a week, So I said, then I'm not taking advantage of it. I was giving them away to my buddies, So I said, well, I'll smoke a few cigarettes after that. At that time, cigarettes weren't known to be that bad as they are now.
All right. Now, while you were there, were you kind of following the progress of the war while you were in England and keeping track of what was happening, or did you just do your job?
We did our job. We tried to follow it. We had a local paper, which wasn't very good, the GI paper. What was the name of that paper?
Well, Stars and Stripes is the Stars and Stripes is the one for
Stars and Stripes. Yeah. Anyway, but I don't know why we know it. It was just we read the English papers after all. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm still a paper reader at that time too. I enjoyed looking through all the different papers they had in England.
Right.
because they're so different, you know. Yeah.
Now, did the atmosphere change at all as you got close to D-Day and the Normandy invasions? Were things getting more tense or more busy, or?
Maybe a little tense, a little silent, less jubilant, you know. The seem more everybody's doing their business, you know, and they not taking their time.
Mhm.
Seems a little bit of that. But otherwise, there's nothing special, nothing really bad, nothing's crucial.
Okay. And then do you remember learning about the invasion itself? When you first heard about that or what you were doing?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that was the invasion. The way the invasion, we all first of all we prepared for it. They will send us out of London to a base someplace, you know, where the boats were supposed to be. They move around from place to place to fool the enemy. And you spent a week or two. I lived with an English family for a while. They rented us. They just allocated different people, different houses, and we stayed in different places. And I stayed with a whole bunch of a nice old sailor and his wife, and for a couple of days over the weekend. And they were supposed to be training to get in shape to. The training was not much, just walking around getting ready. I don't know what it was supposed to be all about. And so, but that was like waiting in line to get on a boat. That's what it amounted to.
Right.
And then, of course, the enemy wouldn't know where the boat's coming from or where the docks are, so they spread these soldiers all over England. So we're all alongside the English coast. I don't even remember what city I was at that time.
All right. Now, how long after D-Day was it before you landed over in France?
A couple of weeks. Yeah. I was not there in the early stages. Yeah, but they had to put us on the LST, and we had to. I think we got in the vehicle because there were some trucks on the LST. We rode across the waters. Then we saw some of the remnants of the battles on the shore, and then we were able to go to the first embankments, the German embankments. We visited some of what was. I saw some German papers laying around. I said to myself, "This is probably worth money to somebody as a souvenir." Where they got the swastika all over the pages, you know, the regular regimental headquarters orders, you know, whatnot, laying all over the place, and back in the. And then we admired the works, how thick those embankments were, you know, safe from bombardments. And then we saw a lot of fireworks at night, a lot of flares and shooting going on over our heads. I ended up in Utah Beach, not Omaha.
Okay. All right. And then basically from there, were you working in a headquarters unit again, or?
No, we're getting located. There was kind of a bedlam, because it wasn't. In other words, take myself for instance. I did not work on any machines. I didn't see any machines. The machines were gone with the forces way ahead of us someplace, and we were landing in behind them, and we're getting installed. We come and get installed, and we're traveling to our installation place. And we're in this peninsula near Omaha
Right.
Beach, and one incident I'll never forget. We're admiring the telephone poles as we were walking down the roads. The French telephone poles, they're made out of cement because they don't have no wood, I think. So they're made out of cement, and they more or less they got footholds. See. Anyway, it's about that time I mentioned this cement pole because there was some bombardment coming from some distance, and everybody was curious, who's shooting all this? The GIs or is this German 88s, whatever. So I decided to climb the thing, to get to the top, because somebody else was to the top and came down. I said, I'll do the same. I want to go to the top and take a better look. So I got to the top, and I couldn't see anything. And I'm ready to come down, but coming down, and this is not something that I don't do every day, you know. My muscles weakened on me, and I wasn't able to to put my foot into the foothold in that cement pole, you see, and I slipped. I came down and fell on my bottom. Well, a funny thing happened is my next day my bottom, my tailbone got damaged, and it was sore. As a consequence, when I walked spread-legged. So it was next day walking spread-legged. I'm the only guy walking spread-legged in my group, Everybody picking on me. You been out last night? they, it took about a week before I lost that. I healed up. What a funny way to get hurt.
Okay, so did you get your equipment eventually set up so you could run a code center? Or?
Equipment was we don't. In my case, I have no equipment.
Right.
Because my equipment is a little toolbox with a couple of basic tools in it. You see, and if I do carry the diagram of it, that would become secret material immediately. See? Right. So it would not always be with the diagrams.
Right. But did you work on any machines, or were you just waiting for something to happen?
We waited until we got installed, and really I wasn't operational. Except we were moving. We were still moving to get installed. It took us some time. I was in operation for a long time. We got into operation in the field, and it wasn't done very well. I think I made one call someplace, did a fast job, and come back. And that was by vehicle, by jeep. And I had a particular driver that followed me. He usually took me around, and he was from Michigan, Catello. His name was Catello, Bill Catello, I think it was. I think his family had. I wanted to reach him to see whether he's still living or so. A few weeks ago, a few months ago, I had somebody working on the internet on it, and I don't know if they ever reached him. They reached anybody. Some of his family worked in the Detroit weathercasting and TV, because there were some women. The young women that were named Catellos, and he looked like a Catello too. And he was quite a driver. He was a motor pool kid who was assigned to drive us around. He drove us all over, most of the time all over France.
All right. Now, you're talking about getting installed and waiting to get installed. What was being installed, or what does that mean?
Well, we weren't doing any business because somehow we hadn't arrived yet. Let's put it this way. We're in the process of getting arrival. That's what I think it was, because we weren't doing anything except moving from place to place until we get closer. Patton was chasing after the German forces. We didn't know where to settle down. And there was some talk about if Patton stopped, we will stop too. But Patton was moving, so we had to follow him.
Right. Okay. So basically, you come over to Normandy. I think it was still June when you got there? Was it July, or you're not really sure? But basically, while the Americans were still fighting not too far away from the beachheads, but then they break out from Normandy at the beginning of August, and at that point, everybody's moving. And you were following Patton, so you were moving the farthest and the fastest, probably, because he was heading straight across northern France at that point. So basically, you were following Third Army, and you wouldn't have time to set up too long.
So it wouldn't be too. Also, we don't get too far away, because then you couldn't reach anything after that. And then later on, the assignments were forward. His forces were forward ahead of the rear headquarters.
Right. Okay, so you're moving across northern France. Now, what do you remember about France, or the parts of it that you saw as you were going through it?
I remember a few things that got stand out in the memory. There was one bridge in one little town where, as we were going across that bridge right around, I saw GIs parked alongside, sitting around, all intentionally somebody set them up there, set them up with supplies and everything else, and they're sitting there alongside the bridge just standing. And it was later told to me that they're sitting up there waiting for the bridge to come down again, because the bridge would be shut down, and then they would put it back up. And these guys were engineers; they were ready to put it up. I remember those guys sitting on the side. I remember also coming across the field after a while, where you see a kid with a GI, and I say kid, he looked like a kid, you know, and he's got a gun, he's got his carbine in his hand, and he's shooting. And you looking to see what he's shooting, and there's a cow there. He's shooting at the cow. Really shooting at the cow. And he says, I'm shooting at it and I'm hitting it, it's not going down. You see?
Mm-hmm.
The one bullet in the big belly is not going to knock it down yet, I guess. They will eventually. And I just walked away from it. I said, that had nothing to do with him. They meet this kind of goof things in the army, the service as well, see, and talk. I met other things later on as well.
Right.
But this stands out to my mind always. This is so damn stupid.
Right. Now, did you see much of the civilian population as you were going through France?
Native then, the population,
Yeah.
you said.
Yeah.
Not very much. They disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't see. Throughout the whole chase of the Germans all the way through, whenever we come to a civilian house, usually it's empty. And people expect they hide someplace. They could disappear someplace. Yeah.
All right. So you move across northern France. Where do you stop? Do you eventually set up and have a base for a while and stay in the same place?
St. Lo is familiar.
Mm-hmm. That would have been while you were still in Normandy.
St. Lo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that would have been in the earlier part, before you're following Patton, right? Now those two places, I mean, if you're in them, those were hit very hard.
There was a mad chase going on after that.
Yeah.
There was a fast mad chase.
Right.
All I know is the next thing we ended up in Verdun.
Mm-hmm.
That was the place where we stayed quite some time, because it was quite a permanent place, because of the fact that those were the quarters. We came across French quarters, army quarters, at one time, the 3 or 4 stories, and we were part of the building, and we had our rooms and everything else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But also that's sort of where the advance stalled, was kind of near the German frontier. So you're a little ways behind the front, but you're in northeastern France. You're not too far away from the front lines there.
We're pretty close to Luxembourg too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and we were stalled there for kind of into the winter.
Yeah, the whole front was. The Germans trying to run away back to home to Germany, see, as much as possible. We were closing in on them. So my service was all around it. My GIs were going from all fronts, from the south as well as from the north and the west.
Okay. Now, when you were based at Verdun, would you go out and visit different headquarters and different units to work, or?
They would call us for maintenance. I sat and waited. I didn't have to wait very long usually. And they would assign me 1 or 2 places to go to, and they would tell me where to go to, and I would go. This is where the adventure starts.
Right.
When I would take off on with the driver. You see, I went, sometimes they give me a cub to go over there. They put me on a cub, you see.
A plane, a small plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's a little further down,
Right.
especially if it's over the enemy lines or something like that. We did spend some time waiting. The Battle of the Bastogne. It seemed like a stop. Everything stopped, and we just stayed. The weather was bad too, so we stayed and waited a couple of days. It was a long weekend, I think, where we were looking at the skies, waiting, hoping that the clouds would go away. Because as soon as the clouds go away, our planes will come back and bombard the enemy.
Right.
You see?
Okay. Now, when you were going and making your trips, were you visiting airfields or headquarters or division or corps headquarters, or?
I would chase after, trying to find the divisional headquarters. They would move from day to day. This is where the adventure has come, because you're told to go to a certain place, they're not there. Then you're on your own trying to find them. You see,
Hmm.
this happened quite a few times. So my driver and I, we were there looking for him. Yeah.
When are there particular trips that you remember or things that happened that, as you were wandering around, that kind of stand out for you?
Yeah, there was some. The one that I lived, it was a mystery. One mysterious one was when we were chasing after a certain headquarters, and we got there. There wasn't there anymore because there was a camp because the ground broken and everything else. So I learned from somebody, GI, somebody was left. Somebody told me that they went in this direction. And that's the only direction they could have went because that's the only road around here, and they couldn't been going back. So but that sounds logical. So I went in that direction. So we rode in that direction, and it started getting dark. And riding in that direction also became dangerous because we haven't seen any soul for a couple hours. We're riding some kind of mysterious land. There's nobody there. GIs gave it up. The Germans gave it up, and yet we hear bombardments in the background, and whatnot. So finally, the driver, Bill, says to me, "Don't you think we ought to put a shell in the guns?" Okay, so yeah, I think I said that we will. So we took cartridge and put a shell, and then we sat and he drove some more, and so finally we came across the GI. Camping of some kind, and they don't trust us. In those days, the enemy dressed up as a GI, masqueraded as a GI, and they were all alerted to the fact. And we had the daily passwords. Well, I had the password for yesterday, but not for today because nobody told me because I'm on the road and there's nobody to tell me what the password is. So when I get to the encampment, they ask me for a password. I don't know. I tell them my yesterday's. I tell them I'm traveling all day. Don't have any. They take me over to the officer. The officer has to make a decision what to do. I explain to them I'm traveling and I'm doing this kind of work, certain kind of work, and I'm looking for a certain kind of message center, code room I want, and all I'm asking you for is for shelter. If you got any food, I'll take it. If not, I'll eat my K rations. If you got any places for us to sleep, would appreciate that because otherwise I'll go back in the vehicle and drive and sleep with my driver and I. And at that time it wasn't cheap either. That was the time we drove a truck, a repair truck. We had a special repair truck that was supposed to be used for repairing machines if we had to. You see. Anyway, we parked the truck. They wondered about the truck. They never saw one like that. It looked like an enemy because it was square and looking ugly thing. Anyway, we were allowed to. They gave us food. This is good. Listen to this. They gave us food. We ate good. They gave me a cot near the front so they could see me all the time. I fell asleep just like that. When I woke up, nobody was there. But they gave me coffee before that. The officer made sure that he went out of his way to give those fellows this coffee. I remember drinking the coffee. Next day I said, what the hell, they drugged us. Because Costello could sleep stuff like I did, like a baby. We never, all that movement, they moved all around us, and they moved out overnight in the morning. They moved out, they left us sleeping there. Anyway, I appreciated what they did. I said, no, if they had to do it, they had to do it.
Right.
So there was no damage done. We went ahead in a certain direction. I found my place, and the mission was accomplished.
Were there ever times when you never could find the place where you were supposed to go?
There was a time when we chased the Germans across, going directly east, all the way almost to the Bavarian mountains, to the place where Hitler had his mountain retreat.
Right.
We went that far, and the roads are all gone, the bridges are all gone. We had no place. We had to go in that certain direction, and as we were going that direction, we came across a bridge across a creek that was used by cows because there were cows in the area and the farmers used, but there wasn't used for vehicles unless you used for carts. Carts. They used a lot of carts in the country. But we thought we'd make it. We stopped and looked it over. Let's ride across. I said, let's go. If we fall, we fall. We got no place to go. We can't get the other way. We'll take our chances. We went across that bridge. As we went across and made it across, the bridge collapsed behind us. So you can see we just made it. That was sort of risky. Yeah, we could have been laying there in the ditch.
All right. Now, did you ever run into any German soldiers?
Doing what?
Did you ever run into any German soldiers?
Yeah, one time we did. That was on the same trip, I think it was, when at the bridge, where we're going to an area where unknown, but very few people ride in the areas. It was kind of wide open, in between zones, I guess. Anyway, out of the forest there come two soldiers, German soldiers with a white flag, walking towards us, you see, because they saw us from a distance. They were walking towards us. My driver noticed that he's riding, all of a sudden he's riding in the fields. What are you doing, Bill? He's riding, he's pointing out to us. So we got out of the car, this guy is a big soldier all of a sudden, my driver is, and he's accosting these Germans. Where's your gun? Where's your gun? Where's your gun? The guy says, no gun, I don't have any gun. So my driver is looking for guns, either souvenirs or he was being defensive, I don't know which. And these guys didn't look like German soldiers, but they were German soldiers. And they might have been kitchen help left behind. But they were German soldiers, and I didn't know what to do with them. Because I had a destination, I had a job to do, and I couldn't be playing around with two soldiers in the back seat of the vehicle. So I just told them to go on the road with the white flag and keep walking. And somebody else will take care of it. I mentioned it to I told them, I think I should stand over here and walk this way and keep that way. And I didn't wait for any questions.
All right. Now, are there other particular events that kind of stand out in your memory from that part of the war, before the war ends? Other things that happened to you or unusual
There were
things?
some other I can't think of right now. Let me think. I told you the
All right. Well, if one comes back to you, you can throw it in. In the meantime, where were you when the Germans surrendered? Were you in southern Germany by then, or?
Well, I was stationed we were out of Verdun at the time. In other words, our station was, at a particular moment that I was, I might have been on the field, I don't know.
Okay.
But I went as far as Belgium, and the edge of Holland, looking for our GI camps, calls, and it was interesting there because I drove to get there. I went by Cub, and we drove alongside the roads. It was interesting because as I looked to the right side of the roads, I was looking at somebody coming out of a vehicle looking at me because there was a side of the mountain. You see what I mean? The Cub doesn't fly very high.
Right.
And they only talk about little episodes. I had episodes of driving a plane. I always threw up in the plane because I was, like I told you, I was through in the boat. I was sensitive. I had the same way with a Cub. When a Cub lands, it floats. It goes wobbles like that. You see, the Cub doesn't land like an airplane real fast. Cub wobbles. So here, every time I went on the Cub, I threw up. So I always took my helmet off, and I put it on my lap, and I was ready to throw up, which I did a few times. So one time, I did that. The captain that was driving, there happened to be a captain piloting the plane. He looked, he saw that, he expected that, I guess. He said, "What are you doing, Sergeant?" I said, "I'm ready to fix enough, so I'm going to throw up eventually. I always do on the planes." He says, "Put your helmet back on." Order. I said, "What the hell? I better listen." He said, "Okay, he's going to do something special. I'll put it on the plane, I'm waiting for him. And I'm waiting to see what's going to happen." He said, "We're going to land a different way. It won't hurt. It won't flutter." By golly, it didn't flutter. You know what he did? He went straight down. And I rode like this. I grabbed the struts, and I actually, no lie, I think I was exactly looking straight down. You see what I mean? And we went straight for the ground. And then he swooped on, landed, oh boy, and it was really relief. And after that, he says, did you have to throw up, Sergeant? He asked me, after, sort of victoriously. I says, no, sir.
All right. Now, did you ever fly over enemy lines or over German positions, or did you stay behind your own?
No, looking for headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And headquarters, safe place.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, there was a one time when the place I had to go to was being blasted by air, and we didn't know it. It was a funny incident. So we're riding alongside of the mountain, a hill, a low mountain, and in the distance we see plane, and we see fire, smoke, and puffing up on the ground, and the plane would take off. There wasn't much of it. It was a Cub raid, I guess, the Cub. And I looked at it, I said, oh, no, what's going on over there? And this to the right of me, we're going this way, and the view is go to the right, is over there, is where this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it ended up, it's exactly where we were going, because the road goes this way. We ended up with that, and I'm surprised. There was nobody out in the street except the colonel was directing traffic. Mm-hmm. And he was irritated that we shouldn't have been there. And he said, we got to get to the message center, you see. And so looking for the message center, that's where I repaired the machine, the message center. But we all read a little earlier, and we would have got blasted, I don't know, you see.
All right. Did you have any kind of close calls, either with accidents or friendly fire or enemy fire, or were you pretty safe?
Pretty safe.
Okay.
Pretty lucky so far.
So breaking a bridge or meeting the Germans was about as much as you got?
Yeah.
All right. So basically, in the later parts of the war, you're still based in Verdun when the war ends, but you go out to a lot of different places and have to travel farther and farther into Germany or up into Belgium to find your units.
Yeah.
Okay. And then did things change then after the Germans surrendered?
Yeah, it was, at that time we were waiting to see what happens in the Pacific. We knew it was going to be over in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Because we had, didn't know exactly what's going to happen, but we knew it was going to be short. We were told so, and we believed them. We were good believers. And it ended up in a hurry. And then we had an opportunity to stay in their service. Or I could have went to IBM to work for the manufacturer of my machine, you see. And, but they would move me to Connecticut, and I didn't want to do that. So I stayed home, decided to get discharged instead, you see.
Okay, but let's kind of get back to, I want to go back to Europe in May of 1945. German surrender. Did you stay in Europe for a while after the Germans surrendered? Because I don't think you went home until the end of the year.
Yeah, I think there must have been a period of time, because I even had a 3-day pass to back to London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you're there because I think your service record indicates that you don't get back to the States. I guess you leave. You get back to the States in November of '45.
Wait a minute. I worked in that's right. They sent me back to London, and I even worked in the American Embassy there for a while, for a couple of days, to film it, to do something.
Right. Okay. So you're there for a while. Now, when they sent you back to the States, did you go in another boat? Did you sail back?
A Dutch boat.
Okay.
It was a kind of a trawler thing. And that went across the ocean took a long time. They weren't afraid of submarines anymore.
Right.
But it took a long time to get across. And I was seasick again.
All right. Was the weather bad, or would you not even notice?
Pardon?
Was the weather bad when you went across? Were there storms?
It was good weather. It was all right, yeah. It was kind of But that wasn't. I was sleep. I was sick.
Okay. All right. So then you got home. They tried to get you to re-enlist. They wanted you to stay in. Okay. All right. But then you decided, but you had a chance. You could have gone and worked for IBM or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I had a chance to bargain with them to see what I could do, higher rank and all that stuff. I could have stayed, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But instead, you go back home. Then did you go to college after that, or?
Oh yes, the GI Bill rights. Went to college. I went to DIT, and then then I went to law school. Then I started the college, Detroit College of Law.
Mm-hmm.
Went to start again law school, and that's when there's a crisis happened in my family. My father all of a sudden couldn't work anymore. Got a bad case of arthritis. He had to retire real early. And the family was my brother wasn't working, you see, and my other brother had a job, but my youngest brother was working. We needed work. We needed income. So I decided to. My mother was talking into going business, going to the grocery store.
Okay. Now my tape is just about done, so I'm going to stop here. All right. Now in your story, you had gotten to a point where you'd gotten back home and you were going to college and so forth, looking at law school. Did you start law school, or were you just planning on going?
No, my buddy was a graduate. When he went to high school with me, and he was a graduate. He was either a graduate or getting to be graduate become a graduate. So I went to law school because I thought it was the thing to do. See, and.
But that's when the family crisis came up. Yeah.
Then I had to quit because I had to quit. Then I went to butcher school in Toledo to learn butchering so I could become an efficient grocer.
Okay.
And so I learned the meat business. You know, I went to school at GI Bill of Rights. I stayed there for 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it was, and I become. I know meat like crazy, but anything can do me any good. You can't even buy it now. Too damn expensive. If it's it isn't tasty like it used to be. It isn't. It's actually not the same beef.
No, it's not.
Different categories.
Right.
Choice is not choice. Choice is commercial.
But now, did you go and then work with your mother in her store? Or?
Yes, I bought a store. We bought a store, family together, and that was it when the supermarkets were finishing up. Because I mean, the supermarkets are taking over, the small stores are finishing up. So we're on the tail end of it.
And then how long did you do that?
A couple of years.
Okay. And then after that, what did you do? When you stopped working in
I
the
went
store?
to work for my wholesaler. I got acquainted with them because they wholesaled me. We got along well, and so I went to work for them and took over one of the routes, you know. And I had 200 customers to call on. You don't call them every week, but you call them every 2 weeks, or sometimes. So some of them are really popping mom stores. They would need a wholesaler once a month only. But I would call on, advise them what groceries to buy and what the prices were, and give them competitive sale prices and whatnot, and do business with them. And that was my job. It was a very interesting job. Every day was something different. Yeah.
Do you regret not going into a technical field, or kind of getting back into?
I don't know. I'd have to change. I'd have to move someplace else. I was happy at home.
Okay. All right. I want to go back a little bit to your time in the service, because you mentioned something off camera that we want to talk about, and that is when you were still based in England, you were teaching other people how to do your job?
Before the invasion, my boss decided, or his boss decided, that some of the people that we service in England are going to be traveling, and maybe some of the problems that show up can be serviced by them, although they're not trained, but they can get partial training. So I would be doing the partial training. So they would come for a week study, and they would reside. We'd find quarters for them. They would stay on Green Street. They would attend my class, and I had my class daily, teaching the machine, and so they become capable of fixing the machine. Some did, some don't. Depends on how good they were. And it was interesting because My method was different schooling because instead of teaching them the names of the parts, I think always just show them nomenclature.
Mm-hmm.
That they always teach them on nomenclature in the basic training. Anyway, I showed them what happens when the power comes on and where the power goes. I pointed out to them. They would have samples of that machine on the table. They would see what I'm talking about. We will learn it real well. As a matter of fact, some master sergeant was part of one of the students, and he says, "I've been in the army for a long time." He says, "It's the best school I ever had."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was quite a compliment.
Well, you were teaching it from the perspective of someone who really had to do the job. So it wasn't theory, it was practice.
No, what he had, the theory is this: he had to know what happens when the power goes on, what makes this cam work, this opening and whatnot. You
Right.
see, the connection, one to the other. So if this fails, this must be good, or this or whatever.
Right. All right.
That kind of it's plain mechanics. In other words, the mechanics of it.
Right. Okay. When you look back at the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what do you think you learned from your time in the Army?
What did I think I've learned?
Yeah.
I don't know if I learned the machine. I know the machine well. I could still probably repair it right now if I saw it. I got, in other words, I got school money for schooling after a while. I appreciate that. I went to school.
But do you think you were pretty much the same guy when you came out that you were when you went in? And did the experience change you particularly, or?
I think I changed away from. I got away from the mechanic part, the repairing and stuff, and I become a leader instead. Because later on, I ended up by working in a pharmaceutical plant, being a supervisor, quality control, and the kind of. I had about 10 people working for me throughout the plant who were inspectors, nitty-gritty inspectors. They would report to me, you see. And so, and I had to decide whether the product is good or bad before I went out of the plant. And I'm happy to say that there was not one recall on my shift for all the years I worked there.
All right. Okay. Well, you've got certainly an unusual story.
Pardon?
You have a very unusual story, and I just.
It's different. It's different. But it was fun, though. Never a dull moment. Because I hated a job where you'd be bored. It was never a dull moment.
All right. Well, I'd just like to close out here by thanking you for taking the time to talk to me today. All right. Okay, and that'll be your wrap.